Hi, I'm Andy, aka Googleman, and today we're talking about marking with rubrics in Google Classroom.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Googleman. Hi everyone and welcome back to aka Googleman. If you haven't done so already, please remember to click on the subscribe button down below. If you like the video, give it a like and maybe pass it on to some other teachers that you think would like it as well. So today we're going to be talking about rubrics, which is a way of marking assignments in Google Classroom. And essentially what they are tick box mark schemes that you can apply and add to an assignment to give some really quick, easy feedback to the students that have completed their work. Now, I've tried this out recently with some performances with some Year 10 classes. Being a music teacher, it lent itself quite nicely, and I was able to break up the GCSE mark scheme into just a set of rows where I could choose a mark out of 4 for each row, and then it would add up to a mark out of the maximum, which for the board that I teach is 36. Now, there are some little nuances that I'm still trying to work out, and it is a little bit of a work in progress for me. But if you are using mark schemes to mark questions, and this could be for essay questions as well, it doesn't have to be a specific criteria for coursework, but if you are doing NEA work, this could be really useful for some quick kind of formative feedback for those students. So let's see how useful this is. If this sounds good to you, let's jump in. So in order to use rubrics, the first thing you actually have to do is create an assignment in Google Classroom, and it has to have a title first. It won't let you create them or even reuse until you have an assignment that is named. Okay, and you can add the rubric afterwards, so you can create the assignment and set it for the students, then add the rubric on later on. For the example that I'm going to use here, I'm going to keep it very, very simple. The first thing I'm going to do is just call the assignment test, and I'm going to set a mark value of just 5. Okay, now normally this obviously wouldn't just be 5, but for the purposes of this demonstration, it'll work absolutely fine. Once I have those things in place, you can see where rubric was grayed out earlier on, it's now a nice shade of color for us. In this case, it's the color purple. I'm going to click on that and then click on create rubric. You can actually reuse rubrics as well. So if you teach several classes or you share classes with other teachers and one of those has created a rubric, you can reuse that in the same way that you can reuse previous assignments. And I've talked about reusing assignments in previous videos, and I'll link that for you above and below. Once you're into the creating rubric page, this is where you set your criterion. You can give your rubric a name, and then you move on to the first criterion. Now, criterion in this case could be the assessment objective in a mark scheme. It could just be a question. So maybe you've set a Google Classroom quiz that has a paragraph question in it or something like that, or perhaps some slightly longer answer questions. You can set and use this as your kind of like marking template for it. So in this case, I'm going to set criterion 1. I'm just going to call it question 1. From there, I come down to the detail within that criterion. You level then within that criterion. So for question 1, it's going to be a mark out of 5. So I've got 1 already set up for me, and I'm going to give this first box a mark value of 1. Okay, so if they achieve that, they get 1 mark for this question. And I'm just going to put some basic description there. I'm going to call that level limited, and then in the description it says shows limited understanding. Obviously, what you would probably do is, depending on what you're teaching, if it's quick feedback on, say, a piece of BTEC work, you are kind of a bit more limited on the words you're allowed to use with those students, having marked BTEC in the past, so you would use the mark scheme words precisely. If this is for, say, a first assignment with some Year 9s, perhaps you would simplify the mark scheme language in there, whatever you would want to do. So now I have that, and then I click on the plus symbol next to it. In this one, I'm going to give it a mark of 2. I'm going to call it inconsistent, and then again to say shows inconsistent understanding. And I will then do the same thing for another 3 levels, but each time I add a new level within the criterion, it'll obviously go up 1 mark. Okay, and obviously within that, so if your mark is say out of 10, but there are 2 ways to get each numbered mark, depending, you could have this and this, or this and this, then you can actually have up to 10 levels per criterion. So you could assign multiple levels within that with the same mark. Okay, I'm not going to do that in this one, but you could actually do that very easily. So I've now got more or less to the end of that. I've got my 5 marks, and I'm going to click on save, and what that's now done is it's added that rubric to the assignment. And then if I wanted to put more detail into the assignment instructions, I can do that here. I can set my deadline and my due date and things like that, things we've spoken about before. And then I will just click on assign in the top right. What this also allows the students to do is actually see how you're marking. So depending on how you're going about it, you might share this rubric with them before they're doing the work, or as soon as they get set the assignment. Okay, and it's a really, really handy way of allowing them almost to self-mark as they go along. Speaking of self-marking, if I go back into that rubric, if I click on my 3 dots here, I've got the option to actually send this to a Google Sheet. Okay, and it'll create a spreadsheet for me using all the words and information that I've given it. It's a little bit stilted when you first open it, as you can see here, so you do have to make some formatting adjustments. But when I did this with my year 10s, I was able to reformat and then print and give this out to the students in the lesson before it was actually used by me. So what that meant is that the students were able to see and use the marking criteria within the lessons, and they were the same marking criteria that I was then using for their work. It gave a really nice context to what was happening with those students in the coming lessons. Once you've got your assignment, then you've assigned it to the students and they've got the rubric there. You don't actually have to wait for the students to hand their work in before marking using that rubric, because particularly if you are using a Google Classroom quiz, quite often, and I've had this several times, if they're not in the habit, they will complete the form, they'll complete the quiz, but they will forget to click hand in or mark as done. Okay, so it does happen, but you can still access the rubric. So in this case, I'm going to my test user student. If I click on them, once I've gone into the assignment, it takes me to a page where I can use the mark scheme. So this is where their work would normally be. Obviously, there are no attachments here in this particular case, but the rubric appears down that right-hand side, and I can just check off the boxes as I want that to be within that question. And what I'm also able to do is, if you've got a lot of criteria, you can drop down on that criterion on the side, and it'll show you the descriptions for each of the levels within that criteria or criterion. Okay, really nice and quick and handy. From there, if they've handed it in, you can then return it to them, and they will have visual access to the rubric mark that you have given them. And what that rubric will also do is, every time you click on a level within a criterion, it adds to a total. So remember earlier on we set a mark for this of 5. I've just clicked on level 4 for this particular question, and it's showing up the top there, mark 4 out of 5. And that then, when you return it, is communicated to the student, so they can see their mark and they can see the level descriptor that got them that mark as well. So it's a nice way of giving them a bit of quick, detailed, and you can put a lot of detail into those levels if you want to, detailed feedback on some work that they have done. Okay, so that's just a quick first look at using rubrics in Google Classroom. Even from my perspective, this is still a work in progress, and I'm trying this out with new classes all of the time, and I will do a follow-up on this once I've used it a little bit more. But I think this is a really, really exciting thing to see and to use, not just from our perspective, but from the student's perspective as well. And I hope you go away and give it a try with one or more of your classes, even if it's just on one piece of homework or one piece of classwork, to see how it works. I'll see you all next time. So until then, stay well, stay safe. Googleman out.